Section R2 is decimals and percents, and we'll also be working with fractions. So fractions, what we've worked with already in the previous section, that's just one way to represent parts out of a whole for a number. The other two ways are going to be decimals as well as percents. So starting with decimals here, so decimals are going to be written with a decimal point. And as we can see down here, we have all of the place values labeled with an example number. So we can see that we have the decimal right here, where I just highlighted. And this is the number 4,896,328 and 9,721 ten thousandths. Okay, so the portion to the left of the number is the whole number part. The decimal point is read as and the fractional part to the right is the fractional part. So on the left part, I'm sure we're used to the place value labels for the whole number portions. For the right part, the fractional part, we start with the tenths, then the hundredths, thousandths, ten thousandths, hundred thousandths, millionths, and it'll keep on going in that order. So it's pretty similar to the left-hand part with the whole numbers, except with the th at the end of the word. So since we are in the base 10 number system, each successive place value is 10 times greater than the place value to its right, and that means it's 1/10 as great as the place value to its left. Okay, so that means the tens whole number part is 10 times more than the ones number part. The millions number part is 10 times more than the hundred thousands number part, and so on. So we're going to do some conversions. So we're going to start by doing converting a decimal to a fraction. So when we're converting a decimal to a fraction, we're just going to read the decimal using the correct place value, how I read it on that previous example. And then we're going to write it in fractional form how it was read. So the numerator of the fraction is going to be the digits to the right of the decimal place, and the denominator is going to be a power of 10. So that means the denominator is either going to be 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and or so on. Okay, and that depends on how many decimal points it has to get moved over. So let's do some examples so we can see. So let's write each decimal as a fraction, and we're just not going to write it in lowest terms for now. So we're going to write 0.95 as a fraction. So if we were reading this out, we would read this as 95 hundredths, right? So 95 hundredths. So the way that we would write this is we're going to say the numerator is everything to the right of the decimal place, so that's 95. So 95 hundredths means we're going to have a 100 in the denominator. And that's as simple as that, and we're done. So 95 hundredths, 95 in the numerator, 100 in the denominator. Another way to think about it is the decimal point. We would have to move it over 2 spots to make it a 95. So 95 in the numerator, and then 100 down here in the denominator, because 2 zeros for the two place values that we had to move it over. Okay, so let's see the next one. So we have 0.056. So if we read this out the way using the place values, this would be 56 thousandths. So we write it just like we said it. That's 56 over 1,000 for 56 thousandths. And then once again, we could think of it as how many place values did we have to move over. We moved over 3. So 1,000 is in the denominator because of the 3 zeros for the 3 place values that we moved over. Okay, and then for the next one, we have 4 and 2,095 ten thousandths. Okay, so for this one, we kind of have two options. So I'm going to write this as a mixed number first. So it's going to be 4 and a fraction. So we write the right-hand portion as a numerator. So we said that that was the 5. The last part here is in the 10,000ths place. So we're going to write a 10,000 in the denominator. So that's the mixed number portion. If we wanted to convert this to a improper fraction, we could do it that way that we did it previously, where we multiply denominator by whole number, add the numerator, place it over the original denominator. We would end up getting 42,095 over 10,000. Okay, so that's that one as a mixed number and an improper fraction. And once again, we could have taken that decimal and said, well, we had to move it over 4 decimal places to get over there to the end. So that means we had 4 zeros after the 1, meaning 10,000. So that's going from a decimal to a fraction. So let's get some practice with adding and subtracting the decimals. So when we're adding and subtracting decimals, we're going to arrange them in a column, and we're going to align them by place value. So we're going to have each decimal right on top of each other. And just to kind of avoid errors, we're going to put zeros as placeholders if we need them at the end of the numbers, so each number is the same length. So let's say for this first one, we have 6.92 plus 14.8 plus 3.217. So I'm going to arrange this in a column. So 6.92, 14.8, 3.217. We're going to be adding these up. So I'm going to attach zeros. So I'm going to put a 0 here, a 0 here, and a 0 here. So now they're all the same length. So now we're just going to add straight down the column. So we get 0 plus 0 plus 7, 2 plus 0 plus 1, 9 plus 8 plus 2 is 19. So put the 9 down, carry that 1. Then we have 1 plus 6 plus 4 plus 3, which is 14. Put the 4 down, carry the 1, and we get 1 plus 1 is 2. So we get 24.937. So that is going to be our final answer. And for the next one, we're subtracting. So it's going to be 47.6 minus 32.509. I'll attach some zeros to make them the same length. And we are going to subtract these. So what we're going to do is we have to actually borrow, because we can't do 0 minus 9. So we have to borrow from this 6 over here, make it a 5. So that would become a 10. We have to borrow from that to make that a 9. And we get that. So now it's going to be 10 minus 9, so 1. 9 minus 0 is 9. 5 minus 5 is 0. 7 minus 2 is 5. And 4 minus 3 is 1. Okay, so we get 15.091. So the tricky part probably for this one is knowing to go borrow. We couldn't borrow from the 0 directly next to the other 0 because it was still 0, so we have to go to the next thing, which was 6. And for the next one, we have 3 minus 0.253. So making them the same length, we get this. So once again, we have to borrow here. So we can't do 0 minus 3. So we have to go all the way over here, make it 2. This would become a 10, but then we borrow, becomes a 9. This becomes a 10, we borrow, we get a 9. And now that becomes a 10. So 10 minus 3 is 7. Then 9 minus 5 is 4. 9 minus 2 is 7. 2 minus 0 is 2. So we get 2.747. If you wanted to check, you can always add 2.747 plus 2.253 to make sure you get 3. Okay, so next for multiplying decimals. So for multiplying decimals, what we're going to do is we're going to ignore the decimal points at first. So we're going to pretend as if the numbers were whole numbers, and we're going to multiply them like we usually do. And then we're going to add the number of decimal places, which is digits to the right of the decimal point, in each factor. And then we're going to place the decimal point that many digits from the right in the final product. Okay, so let's do these examples. So 29.3. So it's 29.3 times 4.52. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pretend like these are whole numbers. And we're going to multiply. So when you multiply, you start with this one down here. And we do 2 times 3, which is 6. 2 times 9, which is 18. Put the 8, carry that. 2 times 2 is 4, plus the 1 is 5. So that was multiplying the ones. So now we're going to multiply the tens. So when we multiply the tens, now we're going to be multiplying this 5. So when we multiply the 5, since it's in the tens place, we have to put a 0 here, starting in the 10 spot. So 5 times 3 is 15. I'm going to erase this 1 up here, is 15. So carry that 1. 5 times 9, 45, plus the 1 is 6, 46. Carry the 4. 5 times 2 is 10, plus the 14, so 14. So once again, done with that one, so I'm going to erase those. So lastly, we're doing this 4. The 4 is in the hundredth spot. So I'm putting 2 zeros here, starting in the hundredth place value. 4 times 3 is 12, so 2, 1. 4 times 9 is 36, plus 1 is 37, so 7, 3. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 is 11, so 11. Okay, so when we're adding all of these up, we're just going to add straight down the column. And if we added straight down the column, we're going to get 6 and 13, carry the 1, 14, carry the 1, 12, carry the 1, 3, and 1. Okay, so now we have to take into account the decimals. So we had a total of 3 decimal places. We had 1 here and 2 there. So that means total of 3 decimal places. So we have to move the decimal over 1, 2, 3 to the left. And our final answer is going to be 132.436. Okay, which should make sense because it's about 29 times 4, 29 times 5-ish. It's about 130. Okay, next one, 0.05 times 0.3. So once again, let's ignore the decimal. So it's going to be pretty easy. It's just going to be 5 times 3, which is 15. So now we have to think how many decimal points we moved it. 1, 2, and 3. This one's also 3. So we're taking it from right here and moving it over 1, 2, 3, and putting it here. We need a placeholder 0 here now. So our final answer is going to be 0.015. So we don't actually need the 0 out front in the ones position to the left of the decimal. It's good to put it there just so you kind of draw attention that there is a decimal point there. Okay, so moving on to the next part, let's divide the decimals. So the steps for dividing decimals, we're going to change the divisor. That's the denominator. It's the number that we're dividing by. We're going to change the divisor into a whole number by moving the decimal point over as many places as necessary to the right until it's a whole number. So we're going to move the decimal point in the dividend, which is the number in the numerator that we're dividing into. We're going to move that decimal to the right by the same number of places. So essentially, we're just trying to make the divisor a whole number. So when we're dividing, then, we're going to move the decimal point straight up and just divide normally. So let's do some examples here. So let's divide 233.45 divided by 11.5. So what we're going to do is we are going to, I'll rewrite it like this. So divide it like we normally divide numbers. 11.5. So this right over here, the 11.5 is the divisor, and the 200 number is the dividend. Okay, so we need to move the divisor's decimal point over to the right until we get a whole number. So we moved it over once. So that means we also need to move over the dividend once. Essentially, we're multiplying the numerator and denominator just by 10. So we're not changing anything. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite this as 115 for the divisor and 2,334.5 for the dividend. And now we're going to divide normal. I'm going to put the decimal point up there just so we don't lose it. So when we're dividing this now, what we have to say is how many times can 115 go into that? But we can start with the smallest possible portion. So we can start with how many times does 115 go into 233? Well, that goes in twice. So then we multiply. 2 times that is 230. Subtract. We get 3. And then we need to bring down what was left over. So we need to bring down these 3, 4, 5. And we think how many times does it go into, bring down the 4 first, sorry. Then we think how many times does 115 go into 34? And it does not go in at all because it's smaller, so we have to put a 0 here. So now we bring down the 5 for help. So if it doesn't go in first, then you put a 0 and then bring down the other one for help. And then we think how many times does 115 to go into 345? It actually goes in 3 times, and it actually goes in evenly. 3 times 115 is 345. So we get a remainder of 0. So our answer here is 20.3. And remember that this is the quotient. Which is our answer. Okay, and then for the next one, do a similar setup here. So I'm going to do the dividend, 8.949, divided by the divisor, 1.25. So we're going to take the decimal in the divisor and move it over to the right as many times as we have to. We had to move it over twice, so we also have to move the dividends over twice. So you can kind of skip that step that I just did over there. It's just a nice setup to help you start it. So the divisor is going to be 125. The dividend is going to be 894.9. So we're doing 894.9 divided by 125. So we have to think, how many times does 125 go into 894? And it goes in 7 times. 7 times 125 is 875. Subtracting those, we get 19. Then we have to bring down the 9. 125 goes into 199 once, so we have to bring that decimal place straight up. 1 times 125 is 125. And we subtract. We get 74. Okay, so we're rounding this to 2 decimal places, so we're not done yet. We actually have to keep going, and the way that we keep going is by throwing a 0 at the end here, because that doesn't really change anything, right? So we bring down this 0. 125 goes into 745 times. 5 times 125 is 625. And when we subtract, we get 115. So we have to do it one more time. The directions say round to 2 decimal places. So we're going to throw in another 0 for help, bring it down. We get 1,150. 125 goes into that 9 times. 9 times 125, it actually doesn't even matter, but it's 1,125. Subtract, we get 25. So we could keep on going with this and doing what we're just doing by adding the zeros at the end. But rounding to 2 decimal places, we need 3 decimal places to round to 2 decimal places. So when we get 7.159, we look at the 9. Since it's 5 or more, we round up, meaning our answer is 7.16. Okay, so that's dividing fraction, or dividing decimals rather. So there's going to be some shortcuts for multiplying or dividing. So multiplying or dividing by powers of 10. So powers of 10 meaning 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and so on. It's going to be a lot easier. All we have to do is move the decimal place. So when we're multiplying by a power of 10, we have to move the decimal point to the right as many places as there are zeros in the power of 10. If we're dividing by a power of 10, we move the decimal point to the left as many places as the number of zeros. Okay, and then we might have to insert zeros as placeholders, which we'll see in a second. So for example, let's multiply or divide. So if we have 48.731 times 100, there are 2 zeros in 100. So we have to move the decimal place over to the right 2. So this is just going to be 4,873.1. So the reason why the shortcut works with a 10, with a power of 10, is because we are in the decimal system, meaning base 10 system. Next one we're dividing, so 48.7 divided by 1,000. So there are 3 decimal places here, or 3 zeros. So we have to move this decimal place. I'm just going to rewrite this so I can have room. 48.7 divided by 1,000. 3 zeros. We have to move it over 3 spots. So we need a placeholder right here. So it's going to be 0.0487 for our answer. Okay, so that's multiplying and dividing by powers of 10. It's relatively simple. So next, we're going to be converting a fraction to a decimal. So a fraction is just division. So for like this first example, we have 19/8. That's just 19 divided by 8. So to do this, to go from fraction to a decimal, we're simply just going to divide. So let's write 19 over 8 as a decimal. So we can rewrite that as 19 divided by 8. So 8 goes into 19 2 times evenly. 8 times 2 is 16. Subtract, we get 3. So once we get to that 3, that would be like a remainder. but we're writing it as a decimal, not a mixed number. So we have to keep on going. So we have to add a decimal here, put it up here also, bring down a 0. So 8 goes into 30 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. Subtract, we get 6. So then we have to bring down another 0 for us. Make it 60. 8 goes into 60 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract, we get 4. One more time here, bring down the 0. We get 40. 8 goes into 40 evenly. It goes in 5 times. So we get a remainder of 0. So that's how we know we're done. So the answer is 2.375. Okay, and the next one, so 2/3, or 2 over 3. So maybe you know this one off the top of your head. We're just going to be dividing 2 over 3. So for this one, what we have to do is say, okay, we actually need a decimal point to help us, because 3 does not go into 2. So we need to put a 0 here, because it does not go in. 3 goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. 20 minus 18 is 2. Bring down a 0. 3 goes into 20 6 times. We get 18 when we multiply. Subtract, we get 2. So if we keep on doing this, it's probably pretty clear what's going to happen. We're going to keep on getting the same thing over and over and over again. So our answer is going to be 0.6666666666 forever. So instead of dot 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 here, so instead of writing that dot dot dot, what we write is a repetition bar. We write it as 0.6 repeating. So this little bar up here means that's just going to repeat. Whatever is under it is going to repeat. So it's going to be 0.6, and the 6 is going to repeat over and over and over again. Okay, next thing, we're going to be converting a decimal to a percent. So percent, the word percent literally means for every 100. Per means for every. Cent, like century, means 100. So for every 100. And it's written with the percent symbol, which I'm sure we all know. So to write a decimal as a percent, we move the decimal point to the right 2 places and then include the percent symbol. The longer method, which we'll see later, is setting up a proportion. So we move it 2 places because 100 has 2 zeros. So let's write each decimal as a percent, so 0.32. So we want to write 0.32 as a percent. All we have to do, move it to the right 2. That's 32%. For 0.05, move the decimal to the right 2. That gets us to 5, so it's 5%. Obviously don't write 0.005%, it's just 5%. Next, 2.63. Move it to the right. That gets us to 263, so 263%. 263%. Okay, next one, 0.1. So we have to move it to the right by 2. So this time we have to put a placeholder as a 0. So that becomes 10. So it's 10%. And then for, for the next one, 0.327, to the right 2, it becomes 32.7, so 32.7%. So pretty easy, we just have to know how to do it. Just move it to the right 2 to make it a percent, the decimal to the right. So let's go the other way now. let's convert a percent to a decimal. So writing a percent as a decimal is just going to be the opposite of what we just did. We're going to move the decimal points to the left 2 places and drop the percent symbol. So just like we were doing previously, having the percent symbol is super important. So we have to make sure we drop it here when we write it as a decimal. So let's do these examples. Let's write each as a decimal. So 73%, the decimal is right after it technically. So move it to the left 2 and we get 0.73, 73 hundredths. For the next one, we have 125%. So move it to the left 2, we get 1.25. Last one, 3.5%. Here's the decimal, move it to, let me rewrite that so I have some room here. So 3.5%. To the left 2, we need a placeholder for a 0. So we get 0.035. Okay, so once again, hopefully relatively simple. It's just moving the decimal place. Okay, for the next thing, so now we're going to be converting a fraction to a percent. So to convert a fraction to a percent, kind of have two options. We can either convert to a decimal first and then to a percent second, or we can just multiply the fraction by 100% and put the answer in lowest terms. Okay, so let's do these examples. So let's write each fraction as a percent. So we have 2/5. So we want to know what is that as a percent. So 2/5. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply this by 100%. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just multiplying fractions now. This is going to be 2/5 times 100 over 1. So 100% over 1. The percent's kind of like units. It's coming along for the ride. So when we multiply these, I am going to simplify a little bit first. I'm going to say 100 can be rewritten as 5 times 20. And then for the denominator is 5 times 1, so just 5. The reason I did that, percent. The reason I did that is because now we can see that the 5's cancel. And we get 20 times 2 over 1, so 40. 40 over 1, which is just 40, so 40%. So 2 over 5 is the same as 40%. 2 over 5 as a decimal is 0.4. If we switch that to a percent, it's 40% also. Okay, for the next one, for 1/6. So 1/6, we're going to take that and we're going to multiply that by 100%. So it's going to be 1/6 times 100% over 1. So this is going to be 100 divided by 6. So let's try to simplify this a little bit. So it's going to be, oops, there we go. So it's going to be common factor of, it looks like 2 will cancel. So if we divided the numerator and denominator by 2, if you want to think about it that way, we would get 50 over 3%. So if we took this and we divided it, we would end up getting 16 and 2/3%. So if we divided it and changed it to a mixed number, we would get that. Or we can write it as a decimal and make it 16.6 repeating percent. So those both mean the same exact thing. Kind of messy, but that's okay. Okay, so now going the other way. So we're going to convert a percent to a fraction. So to convert a percent to a fraction, we can either convert to a decimal first once again and then to a fraction second, or we can multiply the percent by 1 over 100% and put the answer in lowest terms. So essentially, we're just dividing by 100%. Okay, so let's do that. So let's convert 8% to a fraction. So we need to multiply this by 1 over 100%. So this is going to give us just 8% over 100%. So the percents cancel. So it's 8 over 100. And now we want this in lowest terms. So it looks like they're going to have a common factor of 4 that cancel. So if we divide numerator and denominator by 4, we get 2 over 25. So pretty simple. Do the next one. 175% multiplied by 1 over 100%. Once again, it's just dividing by 100 essentially. So drop the percents, it's 175 over 100. So we want this in lowest terms. Looks like we can cancel off a common factor of 25. 175 over 25 is going to, or 175 divided by 25 gives us 7. 100 divided by 25 gives us 4. So 7/4. Last one, 13.5% multiplied by 1 over 100%. That equals 13.5 over 100. So this is going to give us it's going to give us 27 over 2. So I'm going to do a little side work. 13 over 5, or 13.5 rather, as a decimal will equal 27 over 2 as a fraction. So we can change a decimal to a fraction the same way that we did it a couple pages ago. So instead of 13.5 divided by 100 here, we can have 27 over 2 times 1 over 100. So it's kind of backtracking to how we started the problem, multiplying by 1 over 100 instead of dividing by 100. Kind of wrote this intermediate step unnecessarily, I guess. Okay, so it's going to be 27 over 200. Multiply numerators, multiply denominators, so 27 over 200. So didn't really need this intermediate step in here. Could have left it how we started it, 13.5% times 1 over 100%. Change 13.5% to a fraction to make it a little bit easier to work with. And then use multiply numerators, multiply denominators. That was a little bit tricky. Okay, so let's do a couple word problems here. So let's say we have a DVD with a regular price of $18 is on sale this week at 22% off. We want to find the amount of the discount and the sale price of the DVD. So $18, it's 22% off. We want to find what is that discount and what is the new price. So we want to find 22% of $18. So 22% of 18 is going to be 0.22 times 18. So that is 22% of 18. So we change it to a decimal. The word of means multiplication. So 0.22 times 18. we multiply those together like we did previously. I'm just going to skip to the answer because we've already done a couple of them. We get 3.96. So that means the discount is $3.96. The answer seems to make sense logically, so that's good. We didn't mess up. So if we want to know the sale price is going to be $18 minus the discount, which we can subtract just like we did previously also. So the sale price is going to be $14. And 4 cents. Okay, so discount $3.96, making the sale price $14.04. So let's do another one. So suppose you're out to dinner and your bill, including tax, comes out to be $55. If you plan on leaving a 20% tip, what will the total tip be? And what is the total amount you'll end up paying, which is the bill plus the tip? Okay, so it's kind of going to be a similar setup here. We need to figure out what 20% of 55 is and add that to 55. So to do that, it's going to be 0.2 times 55. This is 20% of 55. So once again, 20% is a decimal. Move it over to the left 2 for the decimal point. It becomes 0.2. The of represents multiplication. So 0.2 times 55. That's going to give us 11. So that's the tip. The tip is going to be $11. So that's 20% of 55. The total amount you pay is going to be the bill plus the tip. So that's going to be $55 plus the $11, which is $66. Okay, so to figure out what percentage of something is, you've changed the percent to a decimal and you multiply by it. And in these cases, in this case, we had to add the tip to the total, so we just added that percentage to it. And then in the case before it, we had to subtract it because it was on sale. Okay, so that is it for section R2.